Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Blue Beetle. As the title says, there will be spoilers in the second half, but of course, I'll let you guys know when we get to that. Also, of course, baked sushi, because it is a 420 review. I'm sure it'll kick in probably like halfway through and you guys will notice like the shift. But also, I got this is the only, I don't have a lot of DC stuff as far as figures, I realized. And I was like, Batman's a fascist was like the only connection I could make. So Batman Beyond, Batmobile, it looks amazing. I just finished rewatching this with my daughter. I love Batman Beyond. It is so good, and it is criminal that they don't give us another cartoon. Like, it's ridiculous. We need another Batman Beyond. I'm excited because I finished the show, but I still have to watch the Joker Returns movie, so I'm looking forward to checking that out. So maybe I'll do a review on that just because. But only connection I can think of, so Batman Beyond. But going with this, teenage superheroes, we have Jaime Reyes as the Blue Beetle in this. First off, the costume looks good, and the only reason I touch on that admittedly it's because of the Flash. I thought it just looked ugly. I thought the CG was bad in that movie. It just, even with the costume, it's all the other stuff that everyone talked about, of course, but just the costume alone, I was like, this just looks CG. Like this moment here looks fake, this moment here looks fake. It's probably real. It just, however they just designed that suit, it just never worked for me. And then this, it looks great. It looks just like it does, oddly enough, you know, in the comics and Young Justice, which is where I know Jaime from. So if you saw the movie already and you were like, that's interesting, watch Young Justice. You have to get through the first season, which is not a problem because the show's effing amazing. And then season 2 comes in and they bring in kind of the younger heroes just like in this, and it's like, all right, you get to see Blue Beetle. So highly recommend checking that out. It gives you more history on all the Blue Beetles because there are multiple versions, which they do reference even in the film. But the costume looked good, whether it was CG or real. It seemed like they got like good material for it because it was like, it kind of looked like a rubber suit, but oddly enough in a good way. That's the only way I can really describe it. I was like, I don't know why it works, but for some reason it does. You know, you transition anything from just, you know, flat 2D to live action, you have to figure out the materials. You know, you could just be like, sure, in 2D, whatever, you could say it's denim if you want to, which is crazy, but you can be like, yeah, the Flash wears red denim and it's just flat. It's like, okay, but it's just flat, that's how it looks. So their transition from the comic to live action, fantastic job, whether it was the CG versions or the live action parts, which who knows what was actually real as far as the costume, but it looked like the whole thing. I'm sure there are some parts on it where it was CG, maybe some of the gauntlets or whatever, but there were tons of times throughout the whole movie where I was like, I think he's just in a full suit right now. At the very least, I think the backpack and the chest piece is real, which is more than you see in a lot of things. I mean, Iron Man is straight up just a dude in a gray suit with some lines on him. So it was like, it looked like they had a lot of actual moments with the suit, and it looked good the whole way through. So it's one of those things, like, it feels so crazy that I have to commend that, but after the Flash, it's just worth talking about because it looks so good. So I definitely enjoyed that. So the character as a whole was definitely well done. I like the introduction and the fact that they do reference that there are other Blue Beetle characters. This isn't a spoiler, by the way, this is just the characters themselves. The other Blue Beetles, and this is obviously just comic history, the other Blue Beetles aren't like Jaime. So that's another thing, if you saw this movie or you're interested in it, Jaime is very different. He's the only one that's actually like super. The other people are just dudes in costumes with, you know, tech, and very common trope amongst superheroes, especially in DC, just rich people with powers, or at the very least technology. That's really weird. They do that a lot in DC. Like, I don't know why that hit me. It was just like a flash went off and I was like, it's like a lot of people. But it was really cool that they even, you know, referenced that, and it actually ties deeply into the story, which really shocked me. Like, with what little I know, I was actually happy with that. So, you know, other people who are actually big Blue Beetle fans, I think they might get a lot out of it because they did stuff kind of with the multiple generations, and I was like, all right, that's not what I was expecting, and it was definitely pretty cool. And some of that, of course, I'll talk about when we get to spoilers, but I was happy with that. Like I said, with what little I actually know of the Beatles, that was actually pretty cool because they're like, okay, they're touching on it and referencing things like that. There's some stuff that I don't know, but so many comic runs could be characters they made up, could be characters that actually exist. Talk about some of that in spoilers as well. But I like the way it was handled. Costume looked good. The fight scenes were very cool. Used pretty much all the different versions that I'm familiar with as far as being able to create weapons. He does do the blades at the end, like, you know, the trailer shot, which is super cool, which is actually why I want a Power Rangers thing, because that was a full-on Power Rangers moment, and I was like, once again, not a lot of DC stuff. That's the connection. So it was definitely cool. I like the way they handle all the different abilities, and, you know, going through the of course the comedic first test, which has a connection as far as me being currently high right now. There's a connection there during that first test sequence in the movie, so look for that. But definitely a fun movie. I definitely like everything they did with the character. Villains were interesting, kind of meh. As far as I'm concerned, they were simple up to a point, and then they did something like, it's unfortunate that it was like right at the end, but they did kind of hint at it a little bit before it happened, and it was like, and they I feel like they pay it off. It wasn't the craziest thing ever, but it was definitely enough for me to be like, I'm glad they went that route, because I was kind of like, I felt like there were moments here and there where I caught something and then it just didn't seem to play a part, and then by the end it actually does come full circle. So they seem very simple, and one of, you know, like the way they do it, there's basically two people. There's like the head person who's Susan Sarandon, and then the action guy, so he's the villain, you know, the two main villains. What they do with their relationship I actually think was pretty cool. Like, just Susan Sarandon's character, I'll just flat out say she's just the character you can hate, and I think she did a great job. Simple character, and they barely focus on her. She's just doing evil stuff and being a crappy person, and then it's like, yeah, it's very simple but very well played. It was like, yep, there's some stuff that's very overt as far as villain stuff, and there's a couple things that are just throughout the movie that are like, that's a fascinating, very subtle way to just make me not like this person, because they don't touch on it really, but it's just in there. It's quite a bit of dialogue where it's just kind of things happen, and there's some cyclical words that she throws out there, and it's like, yep, felt like I heard that one like 30 minutes ago. And it's like, just the way they handle why you should just not like her, period. They do a good job. So I really enjoyed that. It was very subtle, and then it all comes together and you're like, I was catching stuff. It's in there for sure. So I like what they did with it. I thought it was a nice odd way to do it, where, like I said, it's simple because they don't focus so much on her being a villain. It is Jaime's story, even though there's a villain in there, and, you know, her involvement with the characters. But I like the way they did his story. It was definitely interesting. You know, all the family characters are good. George Lopez, of course, is funny. Crazy to see him with a long beard. That's like the one thing that, if there's anything that I think of when I was watching the movie where it was just like, I keep noticing this thing that's not a part of the story, it was his beard. It was just like, it's George Lopez with a crazy long beard. So all the characters, I think, do a great job. I love the stuff that they do with the grandmother as well. There's some stuff that happens towards the end that I think is pretty funny, but all the characters do a really good job. I think it was a really good introduction, especially considering the way they tied the generations together. I think they did a great job with this being, you know, a superhero origin story film. I was like, okay, this I think is a really unique character to do it with, because there are other Blue Beetles. So, and this is like even just within the world, it's like people know who the Blue Beetle was. That's just like a thing because superheroes exist. So doing the thing where they like have the generations, I think that's actually really cool, because you don't see that a lot. And them jumping in with Jaime, who is like, you know, kind of the most popular Blue Beetle, especially, you know, modern times, doing it that way, but still being able to go backwards if they wanted to, I think is a really cool way to like kind of just start it. It's like, start with him because he's admittedly kind of the coolest one, but you can have other characters, and you can, despite this being, I don't know why James Gunn said this, but for anyone who didn't hear this random quote, he said that this movie, it's not the first movie in the DCEU, but Blue Beetle is the first new character in the DCEU, but this doesn't count as one of the movies. Don't know why he said that, but that's what he said. So maybe that means they'll be taking some things from here and they'll be leaving some things behind when he eventually does come back, but they should just keep everything they did because it was all great. But loved all the characters, loved the action. The comedy was definitely good. I like the references and all that good stuff. Like I said, I think that's everything I can say non-spoiler wise, so I highly recommend just going to check it out. If you've seen it already, well, actually just go through the spoilers, just let me know what you guys think. So full on spoiler warning at this point, and I'm definitely going to start with the generational stuff. Probably my favorite thing they did, just as a comic fan, them going in and being like, all right, we're gonna have Jaime Reyes, it's gonna come from Cord Industries, and then we're going to really tie it in. It's gonna be like, here's his daughter who knows that he's the Blue Beetle, which I thought was a very cool revelation, because I'm like, okay, she's gonna be the daughter. And in most cases it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like the characters all find out together, like, holy crap, I didn't know he was the Blue Beetle. But she just knew, like, she knew what was going on. She knew her aunt was a real piece of crap, although her grandfather, her dad did do her a little dirty. It was kind of effed up. It was like Ted Cord wasn't even like involved with any of this stuff. It was like he was just on the outside, and then it was like, dad died and he gave everything to my brother. It was like that. It was a little left up. It was like, hey, I understand where she's coming from. It was like your whole life, and he wasn't even, it was just that thing. It was like, that's a little messed up. And then Ted disappears. I thought for sure that they were gonna do that he was dead, because that's actually how some stuff I've seen starts off, where it's like, no, he's gone already. But I like the way they handled this, where it was like he disappeared. So he disappeared. They have a mid-credit sequence. In case you guys missed it, there's a mid and a post-credit sequence. The post-credit sequence is just like a little thing. The mid-credit sequence, of course, is them saying that Ted Cord has come back. He's somewhere. and he's like, you know, hey, Ted Kord is alive. And I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I don't know what his other costume is, because I would assume that those, you know, I know those were the older costumes. I don't know what his new 52 version is, because at this point, admittedly, a lot of Blue Beetle stuff is like Jaime Reyes. So I don't really see Ted Kord a lot, and I don't even remember the name of like the very first dude, or maybe he was technically the second. I don't really remember, but I don't know what he's like new. What the Rebirth? I don't know what they're in right now. Whatever the comic like tagline is right now for DC, I don't know what that version of the costume is at this point. So I think it'll be something cool, I'm sure, when they make it. So that would be nice to see when, you know, I hope we get a sequel. I know with the writer's strike, they couldn't promote this movie as much, and then after what unfortunately happened with the Flash, that put a sour taste in people's mouths. It was like, oh, I'm not really excited for it. This isn't the first movie in the DCEU, but he's the first character. Weird stuff like that. I don't think James Gunn was even behind this, but that wouldn't mean much, because he was like, Flash is the greatest movie ever, and I think everyone said the same thing, where it's like, what was he effing talking about when he said that? That was weird. I don't know why. Should have said it for this. It at least would have been more accurate. It at least would have been closer. I'd have been like, at least I like the movie. But them doing the generational stuff, I don't know. I think honestly, Young Justice is like my most experience with it, but Ted Kord definitely didn't have a daughter in that, or a sister, and I like what they did with that in this, where it was like, whatever Susan Sarandon's character's name was, you could just hate her. She was like kind of racist, but it was just like, that's not racist, it might be like discriminatory. Like that's where she was at, like calling dude Sanchez all the time. She said a couple of things where it was just like, it was the round them up stuff. She said that, like, she had to have said that maybe it was only twice, but it was just like the way she said it, where it was like, they kept putting words in there where it was like very obvious that it was sort of this immigration sort of tag. Like just the words that she used was like, it was very clear what they were doing with that. And it was like, and I didn't hate it. I definitely liked it, because they threw it in there where she kept doing it, but it was never like the focus of anything until it gets to the end, where we find out that the dude, the main villain, or I guess the main like fighting villain, I guess, his memories were basically repressed. And I was like, well, that's a crazy way to take that, because when she said sacrifices have to be made and he kind of looked over, I was like, and I thought for sure, technically he does. It's unfortunate he did it after he like totally blew out the one dude's back, so to speak. So it sucked that he like did that after he already killed the other guy. But I was like, I wonder if they're both gonna turn on her, and they did. Ultimately, you know, one does it early, and he allows Jaime to ultimately escape, and then our secondary villain, I guess, he actually realizes then, you know, he's the one that takes her out as he sacrifices them both. And I was like, wow, that was a surprisingly cool way to handle that, because throughout the whole movie, it's just things she says. Like, you know, they did the Andale thing when she did that like really early on. I was like, okay. I was like, it's a little thing, but it's definitely there, because clearly she doesn't speak Spanish throughout the movie, which, you know, it's just throwing out those words like, okay, all right, I'm seeing it, I'm catching it. It's subtle, but it's obvious, it's there, okay. And then it's just like, all right, round them up, and I'm like, I mean, they didn't focus on it, but I heard what she said. And it's just like that throughout the whole movie. And I'm like, and then it does the flashbacks, and it was the exact same words, and I was like, this is super effed up. They also got me super hard at the end too, with his story where it was going backwards. I thought that was a great way to do it too, where they showed him regressing when he was doing the gun. I love that shot. I know it was super short, but something about that where it wasn't the beginning to the end, it was going backwards. So it was him when he was already like the professional we see, and as it goes backwards, and then it's like the first dude he has to kill, and he's like shaking and crying, and then it goes to him as an even younger kid, is the first time he even had to pull the trigger. And I was like, that was really good. Just them doing it in reverse, for some reason that hit me super hard. And then it went to, you know, obviously him being a child soldier, all that stuff. And then it went all the way back to Kord Industries, when they were the military company, dropped the bombs that killed his effing family. And they showed it like a quick flash. They barely even focus on it, but it says Kord Industries. I was like, dang, this is like some Tony Stark type stuff. And you like just making supervillains out here. And it was so wild though, because it wasn't like it was Ted Kord that did it and then his sister came in and took over. This is what she was doing from the beginning. So when those bombs dropped, she was already in the background of that moment in some capacity, and she was totally fine with it. And then she just walking around like, oh, okay, yeah, round them up, we got another one, we do this, do that. And I was like, wow, that's super effed up. Like his story came in real fast at the end, and it was so messed up, because it was like, wow, she was there the entire time. Like it seemed simple, where it's like, okay, he was in some accident, maybe he was her bodyguard, and then it's like, you know, I'm familiar with what you did to my body. And in my head, when they first showed it, was like, okay, he may have volunteered because it was a dangerous situation. She even says like, you know, like you basically would have died. And I was like, okay, so it was just one of those situations and he's just like not 100% with it. And then it was like, oh, there's some repressed stuff that he kind of knows, but he doesn't really know until the very end. And then it's like, that's why you're so upset, because there's a little bit more to that story that you forgot. And that was dark. That was super dark. And it was just right at the end. And I was like, wow, they just hit us with that at the end. You know, Jaime, you know, he's not a killer, and you know, they're you know, in sync and stuff. And it was just like, okay, he had his moment, then boom, his memories are unlocked, and it was super tragic. And I was like, wow, that was not what I thought they were gonna do as like the ending to this story, where the villain seemed so simplistic. It was like there's little hints and bits and pieces, and then it came together so well. I was genuinely shocked how much, like, not only how well it came together, but how it even affected me, just being like, wow, that's super dark, that's a crazy sad story. But it was really good. It was very surprising because the villains really were so simple. It was just like Susan Sarandon says like some, you know, kind of racist stuff, and then that's really it. And then the villain, he's just a dude, he has the armor, so there's a little bit something going on there. Just when it all comes together, I was like, that was way more impactful than I would have ever remotely expected, because I was like, all right, it's gonna end, it's gonna have a cool fight and stuff like that. And honestly, that was my favorite part. As much as I enjoy the action, I would like to see more. I'm always a hand-to-hand guy, so I would have liked to have seen that. But the hallway scene, you know, surprise, surprise, you know, that was fun, even though normally it's Marvel. That was a good scene. I definitely enjoyed that, you know, just the hand-to-hand, him kind of switching the weapons up. I love the spot where he actually like hit the missile and just basically stopped any shockwaves or anything like that, just in that small space. I was like, well, that was pretty cool. And so the way he was, you know, beating everybody up, that was definitely fun. So that was probably my favorite fight in the whole thing, because there was so much physical stuff and not as much of, you know, sonic booms and them flying around. So the end fight admittedly was like, okay, it was cool. Once the sword came out, that's when it really kicked up, because it, you know, started to get a little bit closer with weapons. And then, you know, they just went crazy, and, you know, they have the emotional moment where he's just beating the mask off of them. Also, don't know if I'm the only one, but when the first suit came up and it was like green and then it had like kind of the yellow 3 lines, I'm like, might be crazy, but that felt very like Lex tech suit, and it was just like, huh, it's got like the green and the yellow, and it's just like move some things around. It looked very similar to, especially I think in Supergirl, the suit almost looked identical to that. So I think that it was really weird. I was like, that just like that has to be on purpose, right? Or maybe it's just there, I don't know. But I was like, that would be cool. You know, you go to Lex Luthor and it's like, yeah, I got this off of, you know, Cord Industries and stuff. It's like that. It's just it's a simple little connection. It's like, oh, that's the thing from, you know, the Blue Beetle movie. So simple connection. I feel like it's just there. Probably wasn't on purpose. Probably was though. We'll see. Superman is the next official movie, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But I was like, that's very interesting color wise, but you know, we don't have to talk about that just yet, so we'll see what happens. But I like what they did by the end with the villains. I couldn't believe they killed the dad during, like, definitely another great moment in the movie where it was like, it was the classic low point of the film where things are like tragic, but it was like, holy crap. I was like, okay, you know, like he doesn't get to save his family, he loses and stuff, like they capture him and then the family's left behind or whatever. But it's like, no, his dad has a heart attack. He's about to take out the helicopter, but of course he's distracted. Then he gets hit. They take him down. They're just dragging him away as his family is like crying over his father. Their house blows up behind them. And it's like, this is so sad. It was like so much darker than I thought it was gonna be, where it was like, oh, they showed the flames and it was like, oh, their house is gonna burn down and they're gonna take some of the characters. I didn't think they'd actually kill his dad though, especially during that moment. And they're just like, they have to drag him away. And it did lead to an amazing moment where the grandmother said that they had to, you know, basically save Jaime, so they couldn't cry. And as soon as they rushed him, it was like, now we can cry. I was like, that was deep. That was pretty deep. Also, she does some wild stuff. She like let the ponytails down. I was like, okay, there's some stuff there with his nana. But definitely like what they did with the family dynamic. That was, like I said, not at all how crazy that got, how dark that moment was. I was like, wow, it's just everything at once. And it was so much worse than I thought. It was like, sure, you know, he might lose, family gets beat up, and that's the classic thing. He's, you know, they lose him basically. But it was just so much deeper than that. So definitely did a great job with that. Definitely like some crazy beats, whereas like that for sure sticks out. And it's the emotional parts, like, you know, the down beat during that moment, and then the end of the movie, which I wish I could remember the the villain's name, but him remembering, you know, his whole life. I thought the pendant was, I think like a lot of people, I assumed that was like, oh, he lost a wife and a son, and that was a part of that crazy accident, and it had nothing to do with it. I think most people would assume that, and then it was like, oh, that was his mom. And it just, you know, makes it deeper. So I think that was a good choice, because I think everyone would assume that it was like, oh, wife and son, you know, wife and son, crazy army accident, you know, whatever. That's how he got to where he got, and that's why he just goes forward, because that's who he lost. But that was just his mom, wild. But I enjoyed the movie. Those are definitely some good beats that I enjoyed. I like that they had a scene where 3 people got high. Always appreciate. Other than that, I think it was good. I like the post-credit sequence with Ted Cord being alive. I love all the generational stuff. I'm not familiar as far as, you know, his daughter or anything like that, but I like that they did that all together. I love the fact that she knew he was Blue Beetle. I love that they did that, because it's so common where it's like she just happens to find out, she knows like some stuff going on, she knows a bit about the scarab and whatnot, but then finding out that he's Blue Beetle, you know, it's just like the classic thing. It's like, oh, I had no idea. They're like, no, she knew who her dad was. And I was like, all right, that was pretty cool. And I like the fact that they reference like, okay, the Blue Beetle was a hero that is known within the world. And it was like, it was when Jaime was a kid. I was like, okay, so he disappeared when she was young. Did she know that he was Blue Beetle before that or not? I would assume she did, because she talked about him being obsessed with the scarab and how long, you know, he would go away. So I'm sure she knew that even before he passed, or disappeared technically, because he is alive. But I love what they did with that for sure. I was glad that she just knew. I'm glad that they have Ted Cord. I'm excited to see whatever they end up doing with his costume. But I was like, all right, that was one of my favorite things about it as well. Just them having the connection and being like, hey, we're not leaving, even though I barely know anything about Ted Cord. I just know Ted Cord is the other Blue Beetle, and that's like their minute connection, because he typically studies the scarab that leads to Jaime, and that's, you know, their connection. So I was really glad that they were like, all right, we're going to just stick with that. That is going to be a thing. We're going to have, you know, the former generation. He will be there. Who knows who they'll get to play him. I don't know if, you know, whoever voiced him would be the character. But I like that idea. I was super happy where they did that, and I barely even know anything about the other Blue Beetles, but I was already happy. I was like, all right, we got the multiple generations. You can already pull that off. They've done the origin for the new version of Jaime, and we have the connection to Ted Cord through his daughter and formerly his sister. So they got a lot that they could do with that, and I was like, all right, that's definitely pretty cool. And of course, if they do the LexCorp thing, because I'm telling you, those suits just looked exactly, it looked like his armor. Just saying, at least a version of it. But I think that's cool. And Cord Industries is of course very big, so they could easily tie those movies together. As a reference, there's already supposed to be like 15 effing people in the Superman movie anyway, apparently. So you know, they could just throw a little reference in there. It's not like they filmed it. They could say, you know, Cord Industries in an instant, get that connection. But all in all, I liked the movie. I thought it was fun. I hope it makes money. That's all I can say. I enjoyed it enough to be like, man, I really hope the Flash didn't super F this movie over. Writer strike, of course, not being able to promote and stuff too, definitely has its, you know, double impact on it. But I hope it makes some money. There were 4 people. I can say it was me. I think there was like 1, 2, 3, 4. So there were like 4 people and a dog. Lady in front of me had her service dog, so that was cool. I had no idea who she was talking to. It took me like 15 minutes to realize when the movie ended. I was like, who is this lady talking to? Because I couldn't see the dog below the thing, and I was just sitting there thinking, I'm like, she's not talking to me. I don't think she's just crazy. She sat through a whole movie. It was super calm. Like, it just snapped, and it was like, oh, it's a dog. There's a dog over there. I figured it out before I saw the dog, but it took me a minute where I was just like, I don't know if I'm waiting for the post-credit sequence, and I'm just kind of stuck there. Like, she's just talking. What is she talking about? It was a dog, so that was neat. Just had to throw that story there because I was confused for a minute there. But definitely like the movie. I hope it makes money. That's all I can say. Because like I said, 4 people and a dog, that's not a lot. And she didn't have to pay for that dog. And my ticket was free. Damn, this movie is fucked. But I enjoyed it, but you know, I hope it makes enough money. That's all I can say. I think it was a good movie, so hopefully people checked it out. Would love to know your thoughts on Blue Beetle. Would you guys like to see him come back? Do you guys want to just kind of leave him in the dust? I think they did a good enough job. I don't think the movie, even if it doesn't like kind of soar to new heights or whatever, I think it was still good enough to be like, hey, don't get rid of him. For one, everyone likes the actor. I mean, like, everybody loves Cobra Kai, and you know, he gets his big break. Hopefully it works out for him, because that's super cool. Like, you go from Cobra Kai, which is already epic, and then you just go straight into being a superhero. It's like, that's not a bad trajectory. So that, you know, hope it works out for him. But I definitely like the movie. I just hope enough people see it for them to be like, hey, let's go ahead and bring that over. It wouldn't take them anything to just at the very least not just like kill it off the map. They could just take a long time, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. We'd love to know your thoughts on Blue Beetle. If you're a huge Blue Beetle fan, I would love to know your perspective on it, because I feel like there might not be that many. So if you're like Blue Beetle all around, please let me know. How did this movie do? Like, do you feel like it was cool to start with Jaime, especially with them honoring the connection to Ted Kord and stuff like that? Or do you wish they started with Ted Kord if you're a big Ted Kord Blue Beetle fan? We'd love to know your thoughts on that, because that's not really my expertise in that area of DC Comics. I got Young Justice, and that's about it. Oh, that's perfect timing. Thanks for checking out. I forgot I had that alarm set, but thanks for checking out this review. Like I said, if you guys have any comments, please put them down in the comment section below. Check out some of my other stuff. I'm getting back in the swing of things. The last thing I did was TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Although the TMNT video game does have DLC coming out on like the 31st. They got Karai. So excited for that. So definitely check out some of my other stuff. I streamed the original game however long ago. I think that's should be on the channel. If not, my streaming channel is always connected in the description, and it'll be one of the little end title cards as well. But all in all, thank you guys for checking this out. Always get stuck on how to end these things when I'm high, because I always say things out of order. But if you guys have any comments, please put them down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.
You hungry? I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. You hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry. Like I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Like I'm Shaggy. Man, I'm hungry. Man, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Yeah, man. You hungry? Yeah.